We're being told by courts that we can't question or demand that religious people and religious organizations respect the laws that the rest of us have to respect because they want to violate the law on the basis of their religion. Churches are not supposed to be political. Like all other tax-exempt organizations, they are supposed to function in a charitable or an educational way, but they are not allowed to be partisan or political because we don't want our tax dollars funding political or partisan operations. But as a practical matter, churches operate with pretty much impunity because they don't have any type of financial accountability for their tax-exempt status. Unlike the rest of us 501c3 nonprofit organizations, they don't file any tax forms. They don't have to account for how they spend their money. It's important that where public money flows, public accountability also follows. And that is where the problem is with churches, because they enjoy the privilege of public money, but none of the public accountability that goes with it. And the IRS, or nobody really, is policing whether or not they're conducting their business in a partisan or political way. And we know that churches are actively involved in political campaigns, campaign intervention, all kinds of political activities, because they know that pushing their agenda requires capturing government power. Women are under attack in the United States. Ever since the Supreme Court overruled Roe versus Wade, we have seen state after state swoop in to further and further and further restrict the reproductive rights of women. The organized anti-abortion movement in the United States has always been religiously motivated. And as much as courts and the Supreme Court would like to pretend otherwise, the organized anti-abortion effort and anti-choice effort is religious theocracy. It kills me as a woman, as a mom, as a person who has been pregnant 5 times and who has given birth 3 times, to have my decision-making during the long process of getting pregnant, being pregnant, getting to term, giving birth to my babies, to have that process invaded, infiltrated by a bunch of people in state legislatures who have no idea, no experience, no training to be involved in that most intimate and personal process. It's just gut-wrenching. I mean, knowing what it feels like to try and be pregnant, to want to be pregnant, to not want to be pregnant, to fear being pregnant, to struggle with all the decision-making that a woman has to endure. That's the part that's just absolutely infuriating. It's almost so hard for me to even explain. Like, I don't know how to explain to men or to lawmakers who are not involved in the process. This is personal. Court reform is talked about a lot in terms of expanding the size of the Supreme Court, adding justices, or sometimes pejoratively court packing. But court reform is more than just expanding the size of the Supreme Court. Court reform is as simple and as vital as establishing a code of ethics for our Supreme Court justices to be bound by. Currently, the Supreme Court is not bound by any rules of professional conduct or ethics, which sets them apart from every other judge in the country and all lawyers practicing law in the country. That has to change. Our Supreme Court should not be above the ethical standards of the rest of the profession. They are not being checked in the way that the branches of government need to be and should be in America checked. And so they continue to rule on cases in a way that the vast majority of Americans do not agree with, and they are pushing the boundaries of their power, and that's because they can. Part of the checks and balances on our federal courts is Congress, and Congress has the power to increase the number of federal courts, increase the resources of the federal courts, add seats to the federal trial courts and the federal courts of appeals. These are all things that Congress has the power to do. And the reason they have that power is to act as a check on the federal courts when the courts are out of step with what the majority wants. All of these institutions, in some way, they answer to us. We need to be calling and emailing not only our members of Congress, but also our representatives in these state legislatures, which is where so many of these battles are now being fought. These bodies are responsive to the people. It might not feel like it sometimes, but they are, and we have to agitate in that way. We also have to join our forces and our resources, and that's where organizations come in. The Freedom from Religion Foundation is one. You can join us, but there are others, and there is a whole coalition of organizations in the secular movement that are working towards this common goal. And we have to sort of take that inspiration from each other and realize how much power we have, even though right now we are in a defensive posture. You know, it's hard when your values aren't winning the day, but I think it's important to just look around and see that we all have this shared idealism and that we all still have power.